What's going on, guys? I'm just about to head into work, so I don't really have a lot of time, but I want to make a quick video because there's a couple people that I know looking at the game, and you got to start with the starter ship, right? And there's quite a few starter ships. I'll tell. I don't know all the information about all these ships in general, and if the wiki's wrong, the wiki's wrong. But I'm just gonna go ahead and base a lot of this off of what I can see on the wiki, but also kind of give you my thoughts on why a ship is the best starter, I believe. And a lot of people, pretty much everyone in the game, just says get the Avenger Titan. Okay. But I'm going to show you a little bit of why I'm not sure if you really want to go that route. It's personal preference, really, if you really want to get into it. But uh, the main thing that the Avenger Titan has, because it has cargo and it has firepower, all right? That's the two big pluses. Weapon utility mounts. You get 4 size 2 missiles. Not bad, but really the gun hard points are its biggest selling point. All right. But with this ship, especially in the future with aerodynamic flight models and stuff like that in atmosphere, it's going to be more streamlined and going forward and probably not hovering as much. I would assume maybe it hovers a little bit, but probably not extended durations. The weight in the cargo bay could end up affecting it, ammo capacity, things like that. The big bonus on this is that it has high speeds. So it's a ship that has a very high top end speed, a very high SCM speed, so it's going to be able to outrun a lot of other starter ships and things like that. All those are big bonuses for the Avenger Titan, all right? But I feel where it's going to really hurt is the fuel capacity. From what we're seeing on here, we got 90 SCU of fuel and a zero point 0.6 SCU of quantum capacity, even though it does have a hydrogen intake. It tells me this isn't really going to be a ship that you want to use for long periods of time in game, especially early game, unless you're doing like serious combat missions. If you just want to do combat and a little bit of cargo on the side, this is probably going to be a good ship. But you're going to have to go to outposts and restock and rearm and refuel a lot more often than something else. And for me personally, when it comes to farming missions and stuff in the game, it's the same argument I've had with the Aquila and the Andromeda and stuff in the past, is that going to take time stopping back and forth at space stations and all that to refuel and stuff takes time off of progress that you could have in the day. So the Andromeda, for instance, I could do a few combat missions before needing to go back and refuel. Every time that I went back and refueled and stuff, it would take me, you know, 20, 30 minutes to go there and get back. Whereas, like the Aquila, I could easily stay out for extended periods of time and do missions and all that. As long as I'm not getting injured, it's not that big of a deal. But since this is kind of a fighter ship, you shouldn't get injured that much in the first place. But to a degree, if your arm gets blacked out and you're injured on a planet, you can't fly your ship anyway. So there's a number of pluses and minuses to a lot of these ships. All right. Some of these other ones that you'll see, like the Terrapin is one that I really like for like a starter ship, but it still has, a really high hydrogen fuel capacity, which means it's going to be, and this is also a very expensive ship, so I'm not going to be putting this as an option in the video, but something like this with a really high hydrogen fuel capacity tells me that you're going to be getting to a planet and then staying on a planet for a long period of time, searching for hidden things that are on the planet, on the world that you can sell or you know, tell your orgs about and stuff like that. Um, Potentially a data gathering ship, which would be pretty nice. But things like this also have um, a little bit slower speeds than, say, the Titan. So 260 versus 200, and it was like 1400 versus 1100 here. But then when you look at the Aurora, which is like a standard ship, I really don't fly the Aurora very often. But what I'll tell you is that when I did fly it, I noticed how fast it was. Now, this still has the fuel capacity issues, like the Avenger Titan, where it has quite a lot of fuel capacity that's lacking here, and it is slower than the Avenger Titan. But when you fly an Aurora, especially for a $30 or however much you get for a pack, this thing books. It is a shuttlecraft in space. So when you're going for short distance shuttle like craft, maybe a little bit of cargo, this is a really solid ship. It's very good at getting from like a planet surface to a space station. So no real issues with the Aurora in that sense. It is a very smooth ride. It's very small. It's compact. You can fit in some other ships. Quite a few ships actually. You can even fit in the Carrack's top hangar bay. So there's a lot of bonuses to having an Aurora for a ship if you really want to look at combining it with other ships or potentially using it as a like a sort of snub shuttlecraft that has a quantum drive, kind of like the Pisces. Speaking of which, we could probably put the Pisces on here. Um, Pisces doesn't have a bed though. So we'll take a look at the Pisces real quick. So Pisces fuel capacity is a lot higher than some of these that they have on here, which does kind of make sense. I'll compare that to the Cutter Rambler. So hydrogen similar to the Cutter Rambler, and the quantum capacity is less than the Cutter Rambler. So I'd probably still take the Cutter Rambler over a Pisces for just a general use ship. But then when we look at the speed, you got 180 to 1000 on the Cutter Rambler on the wiki. And over here we have 220 to 1100. So Cutter's going to be a lot slower than this. This is actually going to be able to compete and try to outmaneuver things like the Avenger Titan. So the Pisces has a lot of speed, which is going to allow you to get over planet surfaces quicker, explore things faster, and escape out of bad situations better than a lot of the other ships. And again, it can stick on things like the Carrack and other ships. Very solid craft as well. You can't really go wrong with the Pisces either. Very good. However, these are like shuttlecrafts. The Aurora, the Pisces, the Rambler, they're all kind of shuttlecrafts, but they're kind of going in different directions. Like the Rambler is probably going to be more out for longer periods of time, you know, moseying around, not as fast, but it's a chill craft. It has good VTOL, so you're going to be able to float above the air and the surface, a lot easier. It's going to help you with landings and stuff in the future. So there's a lot of benefits with that. The Pisces, it's going to have a lot of similar capabilities, but it just won't have the cargo capacity and the habitation that the Rambler has. So if you want to stay on a planet away from other space stations or players and things for a long time, the Rambler is going to be a lot better potentially than the Pisces. And the Aurora, I don't believe has a food system or anything in here. So again, this is like going to be a very quick shuttlecraft to get to and from areas. Maybe you could put some supplies on the bottom if you wanted to stay out longer, but I don't think it has its own separate area for that like the Rambler would have. And so the Rambler really does stick out as like a small mobile home away from, people and places if you wanted to stay out on a planet and just go around and hand mine or, do some things like that. None of these are particularly good at combat, but the Aurora and the Pisces would probably be the two that are pretty much like you leave a space station, you hit the gas, you get where you're supposed to go, you go and do your missions and stuff. You hit the gas, you go drop things off, and then you log off for the day at your space station or whatever because it still has 3 or 4 SCU of cargo capacity. Now, the one ship that you haven't really seen on here that I talked about, and this is the one that I think is probably going to be um, some people debate with this, but I think the Sulian is going to be one of the better um, starting ships for players. And a lot of people hate on the Sulian, but I'll kind of give you a few points on this because I've flown it in the past, and it does grow on you a little bit. Now, what I will say is that It is not the best combat fighter, but it is better than the Pisces, the Rambler, potentially the Terrapin, and the Aurora. Like it's just straight up better in combat than those, right? So it really ends up coming into the Sulian versus the Avenger Titan, because the Avenger Titan is the reigning champ for everyone that comes in. And you can see this has 6 SU of cargo space. This has 8 SU of cargo space. Internal stowage of 1,000 on here. Stowage of 13, basically 1,400 here. And the sizes are fairly, you know, similar. Sulian's probably a little bit bigger, which makes it a little bit worse at combat. But the Sulian also has, bathroom and all the other amenities that you would want on a ship. The Avenger Titan has a bedroom and stuff. It might have a food area, but I just don't recall. And there's a few things here. Is that the Sulian's cargo is on externally, which could be a plus or minus depending on how you look at it. The Avenger Titan has 2 ways to get in, one through this front ladder and one through the back. But if you want to fully load the ship up in the back, you're going to have to put everything in the back here and only come in and out of this front entry point, which means that you're going to be stuck in an animation every time that you want to get in and out of your ship if you use all of the cargo in the back, which is not good. And then if you use the back to load cargo, then you have to open and close your ship to put your cargo in and out, which also could potentially not be good. And then when we look at the Sulian, the 6 SCU is on the outside of the ship. Not particularly good in combat because it means people could potentially shoot your cargo and damage it, but that could also be a deterrent. Potentially, people could come and steal your cargo boxes while you're not looking if you're away from your ship for a long period of time. That would probably be another negative. But when it comes to starting the game at the very beginning, the box missions and stuff I could see being a big deal are getting it done quickly, moving them, get them done, get them done, get them done. You're not going to want to have unloading and unloading cargo and loading cargo like repeatedly in and out of your ship all the time. Loading these on the outside of your ship means that even if someone does kill you, they can't have access to your ship. They can only have access to the cargo. And then you have the potential of them not caring to break into your ship. Whereas the Avenger Titan, if they're going to try and get your cargo, then they have to break into your ship. And if they broke into your ship, they might as well break in and steal the rest of your stuff that's inside. Whereas if your cargo's on the outside, you might not have that issue. As well as if you get stopped by pirates, you could potentially negotiate and just be like, hey, just take the cargo boxes off of my ship and leave me alone. Whereas like a Titan, you're going to have to open up that back bay to give them access to the cargo, which means they could always decide to kill you, and it would be a lot harder for them to kind of do that in the Sulian. But that's just kind of part of the thing. There's also a lot of storage capacity inside of this ship. It has a lot of alien features and it's cool. And it has a very good speed of 225 and then 1100 milliseconds on the top end on the wiki, which means that it's not too far below the Avenger Titan. And you might be thinking, well, the Avenger Titan's still faster. But the Sulian also has anti-grav tech, which is what a lot of alien ships use when it comes to flying their ships, which means that it doesn't necessarily have to rely on flaps and things in atmosphere to fly when atmospheric flight comes in. And we've seen through use in the game that basically if you're flying this ship and I've been in quantum mode in the past, and someone shot missiles at me while in quantum mode in the Sulian. It's fast enough in quantum mode because it can go left and right, back in all those directions without needing like crazy thrust. It just instantaneously moves. You're able to actually just dodge missiles back and forth until they run out of fuel, which is kind of a cool deal because we did it around comma rays, where they shot, missiles at you repeatedly, and all I did was zigzag back and forth until the missiles ran out of, fuel and then stopped shooting, and it was all good. Didn't have to even use any countermeasures, which is already a pretty big deal. And some of the other things here is that the Sulian still has 3 size 3 gun mounts and 12 size 2 missiles. which the Avenger Titan does have extra gun mount. It has a size 4 in the front, but it still has 3 weapon hardpoints and a third of the missile capacity. So if you're not super good at fighting in ships, like dogfighting or using your guns in combat, you have more missiles to use against other people that might be bothering you, and you still have a decent amount of gun power to actually fight people. And then comparing things to like the Gladius or the Arrow, you still have a lot of cargo capacity to use. So it's really the Avenger versus the Sulian kind of in this comparison range for me, because the Sulian just doesn't really have to worry so much about these smaller starter ships, and it doesn't really have to challenge a fighter because it's not a fighting ship, but it has the firepower to dissuade somebody from bothering you if you're doing things on the ground. Now, when we're looking at this, it also has, internal weapons lockers, things like that, and also internal components. So you can repair your components on the inside and deal with all that, which is pretty nice. The Avenger Titan might have some as well on the inside, but we'll probably have to see exactly what all they do when everything's said and done. But that being said, if the Avenger Titan's components are in the back end of the ship at all, where the cargo is, it can get blocked off by the cargo boxes that are inside. That would become a big deal. So you'd have to have your components in the front of the ship or on the exterior of the ship, and both of those wouldn't be as good as the Sulian if all of the components are inside of the ship. Then we look at the agility. So the Sulian is very agile for its size and shape. Thanks to 24 maneuvering thrusters, 3 retro thrusters, and 6 main thrusters, is capable of 19 Gs of acceleration, and it offers an SCM speed of 200 meters per second. So it has a very, very fast acceleration, which means that you're going to be able to use it really nice when it comes to PvP combat and stuff. But also, when you get into the ship, you're able to fire off rapidly from a surface if you land. And with this ship in particular, since it lands up and down, when you take off, you get the option to go in any direction. Whereas something like the Avenger Titan, it's going to basically be stuck flying in one or two directions when it's trying to take off, and it might take longer for it to turn and get to a point where the Sulian is going directly up into space as fast as possible. Um, and you got the options that you can use there if you really want to. But I also think, the GravTech in the future is going to be a lot easier to maneuver around with and land with in the game, because you're not going to have to deal with, all the landing and main thrusters and everything of going sideways. These ships are probably just going to be gravitate, and they'll fly in the air as long as they need to, and then you just land down and touch down. Advanced alien technology, why wouldn't they have a lot of benefits there? Now, the range is probably the biggest thing with this. So the fuel capacity is 438 SCU of hydrogen capacity and almost 3 SCU of quantum capacity, which, if we look at the fuel of the Avenger Titan, is not even anywhere close to that much fuel capacity. So the Sulian is going to be a really fast ship and capable of longer distance travel, and even comparing it with things like the Pisces here. The Pisces has more hydrogen fuel capacity in the wiki, but way less quantum fuel. The Rambler is probably the closest with hydrogen capacity and quantum fuel. However, it doesn't have the firepower that the Sulian has. So again, there's a trade-off there, that the Sulian is pretty much capable of doing what the Cutter does, but it doesn't have the issue when it comes to defending itself like the Cutter will. And then even things like the Aurora, the fuel capacity is kind of low on the wiki compared to other things. So kind of a quick thing, but we can even go look at, say, the Cutlass. So the fuel capacity they have on here is 360 with 2.5 SCU, which means that this, if all this is correct, will have more fuel capacity than a Cutter or a Cutlass Black. And then single pilot capabilities between the two ships. The Cutlass Black does have 4 size 3s and also a standard amount of missiles like the Sulian has, but they're actually pretty close in armament. If the cutter loses even one gun, you're going to be on par with the Sulian. And we know how easy it is to blow off one of the Cutlass's wings with a gun point attachment on it, or one of these engines. So it's not without it's not out of the realm of possibility that a Sulian could potentially take a Cutlass in a fight, because if you manage to just clip off one of these wings, now your gun hard ports are basically the same, and the Cutlass has um, maneuvering issues. Now, the other thing with the Sulian is just the shape of it. So if you actually look at like these pictures when it's on the ground, it does look really cool. So that is a benefit. But if you look at the shape, it has these armored panels here that fold up, and then the gun's set directly behind that, which means that if people are shooting you directly in front, you're not going to just immediately lose your gun. These armored pieces are going to be blocking the gun a little bit. And then the bad problem with the ship is that it has the same issues as the Cutlass, potentially, where if you lose a wing, you're going to have some problems. So you still have the negatives if you lose parts on the ship, but it's still a solid, well-rounded ship for what it is. And then the other thing is that the door getting in and out of the ship is usually like right here behind this leg. So if you're doing like FPS combat or like ground missions and you land this thing on the ground, a lot of times you can deploy that elevator and then take cover directly behind the leg when you exit. And there's a lot of times when you're playing in the game, when you're doing those ground missions, that the NPCs will be rotating around on your ship, and you just don't have any cover to run to directly. Whereas this ship, you can get behind these legs and use it as cover to get kind of a foothold in the thing. And then also in the description of the ship, um, has been skillfully designed to cater to the needs of both humans and Xeon pilots, boasting sleek and nimble structure, is perfectly suited for transporting critical or crucial shipments throughout the vast expanse of the universe. Additionally, it serves as an excellent choice for aspiring transport professionals embarking on their career journey. So, its main purpose is transportation and moving vital cargo from one section to another quickly. So, in an all-in-one package, I think it does that. It's going to do that very well. You're going to be able to store a good amount of cargo on here, and namely, one of the missions that I think of a lot here is the Zeta Propital missions, because those you have to load up into a ship and take off and get places rapidly. And a lot of bigger ships just aren't able to complete those missions quickly enough. The Rambler could potentially be too slow to get out of atmosphere for some of those missions, depending in the future, or could have any sort of engine failure or thing like that. Um, so, like all these ships doing those sort of like high value cargo missions going from point A to point B, you got to think, if you have to deal with combat, you need to be able to deal with that combat. Most of those ships aren't capable to deal with the combat like the Sulian is. And then you got fuel capacity, so a lot of those ships aren't going to have the fuel capacity to go as far in a one-way trip as the Sulian will. And then you're going to have just cargo capacity in general, which the Sulian has plenty of, not as much as the Titan, but it has more than a lot of those other ships. Maybe the cutter can, beat it out a little bit. Um, and then the internal living quarters just means that you don't necessarily have to, go back to station when you use this thing until you run out of fuel. And so a lot of those things are just a lot of benefits in one small ship package that I think could potentially make it a very good starter ship. And I'm not sure why so many people downplay it. Yeah, like it takes damage and you can break a wing off or something and it kind of runs it out of control. But a lot of these aren't really things that are specifically wrong with this ship. It's just ships in general lose parts, and this is a big target. But not everything is also a negative on the ship either. Because let's say like the cargo, for instance, like you have 6SU of cargo on there, you go and you do something inside, a guy comes over and he starts messing with your cargo box. Well, if you had your cargo open on like a Titan or something, then they could just get in your ship and take your ship. Whereas like a Sulian, they just won't have access to your ship at all. And then you have the internal elevator and all that stuff on top of that. So like even if someone did break into your ship and you were inside, they still have the elevator they have to go up, which gives you a chance to kind of fight and defend yourself inside of your ship. Um, Whereas like a Titan probably wouldn't have that option. Also, the acceleration on this is so high that if someone did get on your ship, you could potentially get in the pilot seat and then thrust forward hard and knock them down to such a degree that you could then exit the pilot seat and go back and try to do the elevator. So I don't know. It's something to think about. I think this is potentially a very slept-on starter ship that I think deserves a bit more praise than what it gets. Um, and I wouldn't really think it's going to be that bad on launch. I mean, even in combinations with others, like this could potentially be a pack ship. Like a Titan, you could have a pack of Titans with players in them, but they're not going to be able to have as much fuel as the Sulians. So they're eventually, like, if you have 12 Titans, all of you are going to have to be refilling constantly. If you have 12 Sulians, y'all are good to go. Like, y'all can travel long distances compared to other ships. And then, like, let me go look at the. Um, Gladius is usually like the fighter that everyone talks about. So, fuel capacity on the Gladius. Way less fuel capacity on the Gladius. More speed. About the same SCM on here, but more speed on the max. So Gladius has a similar loadout of weapons. So it's having 2 size 3s and 4 size 2s. So you can get 8 size 2s. So the Sulian can't get the bigger missiles, but it can have more missiles size 2s than the Gladius, and also has the same weapons, and also has longer fuel capacity, and also has more cargo. So if you're going to group up in a gang of Sulians, potentially you would be more capable of doing that for extended durations without support, more so than a lot of human fighter ships. So even if you are a weaker target alone, together you're going to have the ability to kind of defend yourselves a lot more, or escape or run away. And I think this is potentially something that we need to look more into. I plan on getting a Sulian again, so I want to do some more practice with it, more training with it. Same thing with the arrows, but big fan of the ship. Think it's potentially one of the best starters. So give it a try if you want. I have to get ready, get going to work, so y'all guys have a good one.